Hey guys, it's Megan Aller, sales executive with First American Title here in Denver, Colorado, giving you your detached residential market update for July of 2019. Now keep in mind, if you've been following me since the beginning of the year, I've been warning you that we go through a seasonal transition that happens right after Independence Day, and this year has been no exception. Let's go ahead and jump right into the numbers. Here are your talking points to close out what we saw back in July. Inventory saw our typical gains. Usually what happens is our inventory rises to its highest point going into August, September, and October, and July is leading us well on our way. What we saw from June to July was 13.6% increase in the active count for Metro Denver, bringing our total unit count up to 5,890 total units for sale. Contracts accepted were down. Typically our contract count peaks in May and it starts to deteriorate after that. In May we ended up seeing that, from June to July we saw a 7.4% decrease in the number of contracts that were accepted, with about 3,886 units that were accepted with a contract. Days on market also start to stretch out as we get out of the flurry of activity that happens in our early spring here in Metro Denver. Average days to contract was 23 days, so just over 3 weeks, or half of our units were under contract in 10 days or less, which was our median value for the month of July. Looking at home prices, typically what happens is we realize all of the gains in appreciation from January up until about May or June. This year our prices peaked in May and we've started to notice our prices decay going into June and July. Prices ended up coming down again in July. We're looking at $540,000 in extra change here in Metro Denver. That was a decline of just under 1% at 0.6% lost from June to July. Please keep that in mind as you're pricing out your properties going into next year, into the next couple of months, that you have to take into account the retraction that we're experiencing in our marketplace due to increasing inventory and our buyer demand falling back. We also saw that bidding wars started to subside. Looking at the numbers for June, we ended up seeing that our average closed to list price was about 99.5%, so giving some of those buyers some additional negotiating power as we start heading into the later summer parts of our year. Flash sales, or the number of units that went under contract in 7 days or less, was down to 43.1% of all of the transactions closed in 7 days or less. From here until the end of the year, we can anticipate that number dropping down to about a third of all the listings. At the end of 2019, we'll be closing in that first 7-day period. Again, we still had very strong offers, even though it was down to 99.5%. Of all the listings that closed last month in our detached single-family residential area, we ended up seeing that still 57.6% of them sold for at or over their asking price. Just fewer of them had multiple offers on them. Again, what happens as we go into July, August, September, beginning of October, inventory rises naturally, our buyer demand is starting to taper off, and so we experience retraction in our marketplace. What we can see at this point is that buyers are enjoying roughly twice as many options right now in the marketplace as what they would typically expect to see in those spring months. So if you've had those buyers that were FHA approved, VA approved, couldn't make up the appraisal gap, were less competitive in competitive offer situations, they're contingent on the sale of another home, or perhaps they're a move-up buyer, this is a fantastic time for those buyers to be more active in the marketplace because homes aren't selling as quickly, prices are falling back ever so slightly, but they have twice as many choices in the marketplace. Now, again, what we end up seeing is that prices end up falling back over the next 2 to 3 months, and we don't want to have any concerns out there that this is anything more than a typical seasonal shift. Oftentimes, if we're not interpreting this information for consumers, what they're doing is interpreting it on their own, and they come to the conclusion that we're in a bubble or there's a larger recession at hand. What we can expect to see is typically going from June to July, we experience a 1% fallback in prices. This year, we only lost about 0.5%. Now, we did have slower gains in the first half of the year, but keep in mind that from January to May, our prices went up by 10.5% here in Metro Denver. What's going to happen over the next couple of months? Prices will fall somewhere between 3 to 5%. By the end of 2019, I'm anticipating about a 5.7% overall appreciation rate, which is still double what we would expect to see at this point. However, if you're getting ready to list your homes into August, September, and October, you have to take into account this decay in pricing so that you're pulling back in your pricing, you're not expending extra time on the market. Okay. Last thing that we'll talk about, price reductions. Again, for those buyers that were less competitive in spring months, there are more price reductions that are starting to come forward. If you choose to wait to list your home later into the year, you are more likely to have to make a price reduction to go under contract. So far into 2019, we've noted that price reductions are more frequent, but they've been smaller overall. As of right now, those homes that closed in July, it was about 31.5% of them had to make a price reduction to receive a contract. That's up from the 23% that we've averaged over the last 5 or 6 years. Okay. Now, finally, these numbers were for the greater Metro Denver area, 7 Metro Denver counties. If you're looking at this compared to other reports, please keep in mind that our numbers report a little bit differently. I hope that if we're able to help you better advise your buyers and sellers, that we'll get to meet them at First American's closing tables. I hope that you'll tune in again next week for our Detached Metro Denver market review. We'll see you soon.